and how are you today? On this fine, wet, misty, moisty England day that I'm in here, but fortunately in my nice, warm, comfortable, dry, all provisions provided for by me in the house, etc. So, materially, I'm fine, thank you very much. How are you? Well, I'm getting on. I'm 64 years old, and I'm screaming. Yes, I have my own little material comfort in a nice, comfortable area, nice, comfortable middle England, north of London, by St Albans, a town called Harpenden, Hertfordshire. And I've been at this all my life, how to make this world a better place for my passing. And I paraphrase slightly, but the idea is there that where good men and women, good men and women stand by and allow evil to take place, they become a part of it. I'm not suggesting necessarily that I'm a good man, but I do try to be a better Christian day by day. We've just gone through this Holocaust Memorial Day last Wednesday, 27th of January, recognizing the appalling treatment of the Jews by the Germans primarily, and other then Holocausts, crimes against humanity which have been committed. And then I obviously listen to the news, the world news and so on and so forth. The BBC is, I believe, generally still very genuine in its efforts to try and present the news as best as they can and in a neutral, balanced way. So the Uyghur people and the Rohingya people were both being persecuted just now, we know, in the world. I know virtually nothing about them. I have sort of looked up a little bit, but it's this ongoing cycle of monstrous behavior from one set of people to another lot. I mention it, I'm afraid, on a pretty regular basis, not the least of which is the manufacture and sale of arms, and the biggest exporter of these arms, and the sale of them thereby, to all and sundry, quite frankly, is America. Russia second, I think China. Britain's up there. British Aerospace, France, Canada. I looked at becoming a politician in my early 20s. I'm now 64 years old. Well, thank heavens, I recognized pretty early on that I just simply would not be able to survive in that environment. Yes, we do need someone to run the country. We need good leaders. And not just the country, to run all sorts of stuff. Not the least of which, obviously, are the big organized churches. Now, how are you? How am I? Well, the facts of my life are such that I'm screaming, basically, at my utter inability to actually, practically do something about the world in which I continue to live and accept the benefits of living in a modern Western democracy with health systems and material well-being and freedom of speech, for heaven's sake. So there's much to be thankful for in living in a country such as England. Indeed, clearly this is why so many people are trying to get in here. But the moment I'm settled like this, I've always been like this throughout my life, my spirit is casting around to try to work out a way of doing something practical, realistically, with the resources God has given me in this world to make it a better place for my passing. So yes, I do make these films. I do have very clear ideas about in the first instance, the two commandments, so the meaning of life, why us human beings are here in God's earth is, first of all, to love Him. Forget everything else. Deny yourself, deny everything. Deny your personal well-being, your friends, family, everything. Love God first. That is clear to me. And then, of course, the second commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself. And who is my neighbor? Well, in the world we live in, essentially, the whole world is my neighbor. Well, I can't solve the whole world's problems, so I don't have grandiose ideas, but sitting here in material comfort is not good enough. Now, from Psalm 46, verse 10 comes, "Be still and know that I am God." God's the boss and He'll sort everything out. But He wants us to do things too. It's certainly in the letter of James and in Paul's letters too. Faith without works. So I'm blessed with my faith, a rock-solid Christian faith. That's wonderful. And therefore my life in part is justified through my faith. Nothing else. And then through God's grace to perform the works He has prepared for us. That is my difficulty, my inability to, I've got a good brain. I can see the world around me. How can I? The two wars in Iraq happened in my lifetime. I didn't go on marches and things. I think a lot of that is more just for sort of self, to make yourself feel better that you've at least done something. Well, fine, well and good, but I just don't see the point. Because I know what the outcome is, that once these politicians have made their minds up, on they go. America's committed the biggest crimes against humanity in recent history by murdering, slaughtering indiscriminately tens of thousands of innocent people in Iraq for our Western oil, or the flow of oil from Saudi Arabia and elsewhere in the Middle East. That to me is absolutely clear. So we're the culprits, and we purport to be Christian. That is the real nub of the problem. I am not a priest through the Church of England. Hence why I'm here at St. Albans. I looked long and hard at it, so it's not as if I know nothing about it. But the Queen is the supreme governor of the Church of England, the Queen of Britain, the Commonwealth and whatever. But she's the head of the army. Well, that's just utterly absurd. It's a complete contradiction. On the one hand, if push comes to shove, Britain decides to go to war with someone, she'll sign the papers. But she then purports to be a Christian. Well, I'm not judging. It's just obvious. It's evil. I've spoken at length elsewhere about this. And I'm afraid if we get on to the biggest organised Christian church, the Roman Catholics, which I don't want to ramble on about, but tragically to me, they have been the organisation of man, Christian organisation, purportedly Christian organisation of mankind, which clearly has existed for the longest time, since Christ, obviously, instituted by Christ through Peter, St. Peter, Simon Peter, Caiaphas, the rock. Simon Peter, am I right there, Caiaphas? Well, I don't think I am I? I've whacked in a completely different Caiaphas, is the chap who had Christ crucified, the Jewish leader, wasn't he? I think, or Roman leader. Oops, anyway, I do apologise for my ignorance. Simon Peter, the rock. And then on we go. And this is human nature. Christ gave us the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive them that trespass against us. Obviously, because we will fall out. But if you truly have the love of Christ in your heart, you cannot perpetrate acts of physical violence against another human being. You can't even sit and harbour thoughts about it. You mustn't. It should be banished from your spirit. For before you come to God, you must forgive your neighbour whatever they've done. You must find a way of reconciling. How can you come to God if you've got hatred in your heart? Why should he listen to you? With all your little plans and schemes, and all the time you're breaking the second commandment, left, right and centre. Love your neighbour. Why should he listen? Well, I see this clearly. The pandemic is just the absolute beginning of God taking control of this world. He's given us something, never mind where it came from originally, whatever the arguments about that. The fact is, this one little seed of a bug, a coronavirus, which is now mutating, of course, has literally brought the world to its knees. That's nothing. God can do much more powerful things than that. For heaven's sake. So I'm just so clear in my own Christian thinking about these matters. And yet, there are my films, over 3,000 films I've made. Now it's, I believe, the last 12 years. I started in early spring of 2008. That's 13 years, in fact. That's when I started. Yes, one could sort of look at it as rehearsing, practicing, getting my own thoughts, lining up the ducks, or whatever they say. See if they all line up and make sense. But the world's on its head. I'm not on my head. I'm a Christian. I know the difference between right and wrong. I know that selling arms is wrong. I understand the arguments why we sell them, Britain, to Saudi Arabia, for instance, because if we don't, someone else will, and the economy is based on it. Huge chunks of money are involved, taxes and all the rest of it, and people's jobs. Obviously, I understand that, but it doesn't make it right. Hitler employed people, for heaven's sake. That must have been a big rationale for why the German people sort of followed him from the 30s onwards. Wasn't he Chancellor, I believe, in 1933? Started out, and there was massive inflation and poverty and all the rest of it in Germany, and he got the economy going somehow. And people liked him for that. People liked that man in Russia, the head of Russia, Putin. I won't even say the man in America. He's out of office now, thank heavens. But clearly, many millions of people still think he's got the right approach. I mean, like, the man's awful. He's now just another Joe Bloggs, and hopefully will recede into nothingness where he came from, like everyone else. The only empire that will last, the only thing, for want of a better word, I just can't think of a better word, I ought to be able to, but there we are, that will last to eternal life is this love of God through Christ. Everything else will fall into nothingness. Anything made of man will fall into nothingness. So it's from the Gospel of John. The opening of the Gospel of John. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing that was made will be made. Nothing, if it does not have God in it, will last. And yet with God in, whatever it is that one does in one's lifespan, 60 years and 10, will endure to eternal life. And I did look it up through BibleGate, where I made a film, Eternal Life, and there are 45 quotes, only one in the Old Testament of the phrase eternal life in my New International Version of the Bible. And then the bulk of them are in the Gospel of John. This promise of eternal life and aspiring to eternal life and the hope of eternal life, and come unto me, Christ says, and, drink of my body, eat of my body and drink of my blood. And God's covenant with us then through Christ is eternal life. And that's it. That is the message. And if I could see that, both in my own personal life, in the people I know personally, and through this magic machine and the internet and all the rest of it, to see that love triumphing, it will triumph, with or without me. I could be run over by the next bus, or whatever, because that is God's covenant with mankind. First of all, with his chosen people, the Jews, the Israelites, the Hebrews. He made these covenants from Abrahamic times, 2,000 years before Christ, through the millennia. How are you? I'm fine. As you see, I'm not. I'm screaming. I'm afraid I ended just a recent film with really rather a rude word, beginning with B and ending with locks, without filling in the blanks. It's because I'm so frustrated, utterly unfulfilled. All this love inside me, and I'm trying to spread it around, as it were, and I just don't see any fruit. What more can I do? What more should I be doing? That's my problem. I insist upon it. I pray about it constantly. So there we are. This music's so beautiful. It's Schubert. It's a great comfort to know there is still beauty in the world. Bit of a long old ramble of mine, but there we are. I think very few people actually ever watch the whole of these things, and I wouldn't watch someone else rambling on either, quite frankly, but there we are. This is a beautiful Franz Schubert's quintet, the second movement, the Adagio, starting at about minute 15. It's actually 5 minutes. And it just is so beautiful. Sort of makes one, I don't know. We're capable of so much. Beauty, human beings. It's to that which I appeal, that in human nature, beauty, in whatever form it takes. In thought, in word, in deed.